Hey everyone, Firegross here, and today I'm really excited to go through the 3.17 reveal and talk about all the hidden information that perhaps wasn't obvious during your first time watching it. A lot of other content creators today are going to be breaking down the reveal that we just got and talking about everything that you guys already watched. Instead, I'm going to be talking about all the stuff that you perhaps missed. There was a lot of subtle information contained within all these slides, and it was very easy to miss since everything was going so fast, and I'm sure you guys were just as hyped as I was, and perhaps getting swept up in that hype and not focusing on all the information being thrown at you. Today's video is going to be aimed towards the people that watched the reveal. However, we're going to be doing a what you did see, what you didn't see format, so those who didn't watch the reveal can still follow along with what I'm talking about. Today's video is going to be very fast as well, so if you need to slow it down, just go ahead. I have a lot to get through, and this is going to be probably one of my longest videos I've recorded in a while, but I need to talk fast and get through everything, and there's not going to be very much time for ranting and opinions. What we do know about the two new map influences is that basically sometime during YOLO maps, you're going to get the option to choose between whether the Maven witnesses your map boss skills, or you have the Eater of Worlds or the Searing Exarch influence your map. Now, if you have any of the two new options influencing your map, they're going to add extra mobs into your map, and the more of these types of maps that you run, the more mobs are going to be added. Eventually, you're going to encounter a Guardian-style mini-boss. There is a set-in-stone Guardian or mini-boss for each type of pinnacle boss, basically, whether it's the Eater or the Exarch. And once you kill that mini-boss, you're then going to continue being able to progress the bar until you encounter the pinnacle boss itself. Now, once you've killed the pinnacle boss, you're then able to just repeat this entire process. However, the next time you encounter the mini-boss and the pinnacle boss, you're going to receive keys that are rollable and tradable. This is really important. If you think back to Uber Order, you used to be able to sell your Uber Order, however, it was kind of complicated. You had to post on Discords or post in certain channels in-game and find a buyer for this sort of stuff, and it was a little more complicated. Nowadays, basically, once you are ready to proc the Eater of Worlds, you just get a key, you put it in your stash tab and give it a price, and someone else is going to buy it, and you can keep farming these keys. Now here's what you might have missed. So you don't actually need to defeat the Guardian in order to progress to the Pinnacle boss on your subsequent kills. So once you've killed the Guardian boss and you've killed the Pinnacle boss and you're starting to farm the keys, you can farm both the Guardian and the Pinnacle boss keys without having to kill either one. So you basically get to the point where you proc the mini boss, you're going to receive the key, you just continue the progression bar along until you encounter the Pinnacle boss at that point, and then you just sell both keys. Now, you can trade both keys for profit and just farm the keys rather than actually doing the fights. This is really good news. There are a lot of people who didn't like the Sirus encounter and would have rather traded access to the Sirus to other people who were willing to pay money to access the Sirus loot. And in fact, some people did via the TFT Discord. This is really good because now we're just receiving keys that we can trade away and make money. This is going to be an entire strategy where basically you're farming Alkengro maps, you're farming the keys, and then you're selling the keys for some extra added profit here and there. But it's very important to keep in mind, you're not going to be able to farm the keys until you kill them via the quest encounters first. The first time you encounter these bosses, they're going to be at full power, and apparently they are harder than Maven, right? Keep that in mind. There's no such thing as, doing Sirus at A5 anymore or anything like that. These bosses are straight up just harder than what Maven is at the moment, and that means that, the first time you encounter these bosses, you're probably not going to actually be able to kill them. But if you can produce a character that is able to kill them, then you're going to be able to farm the keys. You never have to do the fight again, and you can just farm the keys and sell them for profit. Judging by the chase unique items that are being revealed this league, there's probably some very valuable loot coming from these bosses, and these keys are going to be worth a good amount of money. So, I would really keep that in mind when picking your league starters. Now, the keys can be rolled like maps, which likely determines the quantity of the Eldritch Currency drops and other reward types you're dropping from this. Now, it's not clear whether we're going to be able to drop multiple uniques based on the quant or anything, but if the Maven invitations are any indication, where you can roll these similarly, basically putting mods on these keys are going to be a really important part of maximizing the sort of loot. I suspect that the people buying the keys are going to be the kind of people that can do these keys at 100 quant and stuff like that. If you can't do the keys at 100 quant, you're not going to be buying them because the keys are going to be worth what they are to the people that are farming them at are farming them at 100 quant and getting the maximum amount of rewards out of them. Now, the new mods are apparently unique to these keys, but I don't think that's confirmed. I think that's just sort of, maybe they worded it in a way that it sounded like that. I have seen some of these mods appearing on maps further on in the presentation, so I think it's maybe just possible that they added new map mods, and I don't know, maybe there's some miscommunication or something like that there, but according to them, basically there are new mods that are unique to these keys. Eldritch Altars are something I didn't expect, but now that they have talked about them, they're something that I think should have been put in the game a long time ago. They're actually really cool sounding. So the way they're going to work is that in the Eldritch influenced maps, you're going to come across altars. There are potentially going to be multiple altars per map. By the sounds of it, and you're going to choose between the bottom or the top option. Each option has a reward or a penalty. So as you can see here in this picture, map boss hits always shock, and map boss drops +1 Eldritch Currency is the top option, and the bottom option is that you have grasping tentacles while stationary. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that does, but it's certainly a bad effect, and then the payoff for that is getting 8% increased quantity of items found in this area. Now, what you might have missed about this is that basically from the way they described it, their effects are going to stack cumulatively within the same map. So if you come across, I assume, like 5 of these altars within the map, you can stack up all of the reward types. And something that's interesting about this, if you put a bit of thought into it, is that you're going to potentially just be able to stack the map boss with a whole bunch of rewards. They made it sound like one of the options is always going to buff the map boss rewards and the map boss difficulty, and the other option is going to buff the rest of the map. Now, this could lead to a certain strategy where you're doing scoured map farming, right? So scoured map farming is something I did on stream a few weeks ago. It was very profitable, when the conditions are right for it. But basically, map bosses are going to continue to drop Elder Guardian maps, Shaper Guardian maps, Synth maps. They're now dropping Conqueror maps, and if they're dropping additional bonus Eldritch currencies and other things like this, like the altars giving the map bosses a lot of extra loot, we're going to have a situation where map bosses are potentially going to be really valuable. So valuable to the point that maybe, as long as you can sustain maps, you can just skip the entire map, run to the map boss, and kill it, right? So, a few weeks ago, we did Mesa farming, where we were basically just entering the map, running straight to the boss, killing the boss, rinse, repeat. We were able to do, I think, something like a sub-20-minute Sirus cycle, just by farming Mesa like this. And the circumstances seem perfect for this, especially with the new Atlas tree that we're going to talk about later. A lot of the travel nodes appear to basically buff the amount of map drops you're getting off the map boss, which is going to further add to this. I think this is a really interesting implication, because it could change the entire way we view map farming, particularly in the early game when we don't have min-maxed characters that can handle like all of the mods that we're going to be doing. The only sort of hiccup here is that the map bosses are going to be hard, but if you're weak starting with a bossing character, this isn't really a penalty. If you're weak starting with a bossing character, maybe you don't care about the rest of the map anyway, because the rest of the map takes a long time to sort of kill. You can just front load all your rewards onto the map boss and kill the map boss and just make a ton of money really early on. Now, Voidstones are the replacement to Watchstones, as they've explained. They're going to drop from the Maven, the Uber, the Eater of Worlds, and the Searing Exarch fights upon killing them for the first time. So these aren't something you're going to keep owning or anything. They're not unique. I think they basically work like quest items effectively. And they're going to raise the level of all the maps in the Atlas when they are socketed. They're also now the only way to access Sextants. So if you haven't earned these, you aren't going to be able to interact with Sextant mods. And this means also that this is sort of going to be like, Sextants are going to move towards being like a deeper endgame mechanic, rather than something you can start slapping on your Atlas, to help along your white and yellow map progression. Now, what probably wasn't obvious when you first watched it is that the Voidstones are appearing to raise the tiers of all maps by 4. And you can see this because the tier 1 maps don't turn yellow after the first Voidstone, but after the third one they turn red, which is about kind of on par with what they should be. If they were raising it by 3, you would end up with a situation where the tier 1s end up at tier 13 with 4 Voidstones in, but we've been told by GGG that all the maps on your Atlas are going to be tier 16, so I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, that does also have the implication that all of your maps that you're farming, once you've collected all the Voidstones, are going to be tier 16, which means when you make a subsequent character that's going to be like a mapping-only character, maybe you make a bow character just for mapping, you do have to consider that all of your maps are going to be tier 16. That's going to make the endgame harder, basically. At the moment, I think only around 25% to 30% of all maps are tier 16. They're weighted more towards dropping tier 14 and 15 when you have a fully socketed Atlas. And if you want to know exactly what I'm referring to, think about Dark Forest. When Dark Forest is a tier 14, on a lot of builds that maybe aren't quite cutting it, you can go in there and still insta-kill the boss. When it's tier 16, you start to have a lot of problems. You know that when you were doing Dark Forest in tier 16, you're probably just going to skip the boss and leave the map, unless you have a really good build that can burst the boss down before, he turns into a wolf. So this is going to make mapping requirements go up quite a bit. It shouldn't be a too big of a problem. If you have all the Voidstones, I presume you have a character that's strong enough to kill all the bosses. And if you have a character that's strong enough to kill all the bosses, then you can probably farm enough money to make a good mapping character. But it is something to keep in mind. We're not just going to have a walk in the park with some bosses where, you know, like GGG throws at us, you know, tier 14 Dark Forest, and, you know, we get free map kills, right? Farming map bosses is probably going to be a little bit harder, so just keep that in mind going forward. So we are getting an entire Atlas passive tree, complete with like over 600 nodes apparently. I'm going to include the full thing with somebody's best guess at what all the nodes are in the description of this video. For now, you can just, I guess, look at this sort of preview picture that shows you a fraction of it. Now, what we do know is that we're getting over 600 Atlas nodes. Many of them, however, are minor or travel nodes. So as you can see here, this is like a ritual cluster. There are 5 minor nodes, 1 major node. The major node is going to guarantee 4 ritual altars every time you encounter ritual. And all the travel nodes, I believe, do things such as like increase the chance for a map boss to give you a connected map by 2%. Now, for every map that we complete and get bonus objective for, we're getting 1 point to allocate onto this tree. We're also getting 1 from each of the pinnacle bosses, and apparently 11 are earned from Maven. However, as I understand it, we are not getting 11 just for killing Maven, rather we're getting 1 for Maven, and then like a whole bunch more for doing her various invitations. It sounds like they're adding more invitations into the game, so they're probably going to add the Conqueror invitation, and then maybe a collection of various map bosses for us to do, something like that, or maybe just the first few, you know, maybe as we progress through like the 3 boss invitations, the 4 boss, the 6 boss, the 10 boss, we'll get some from them. I don't know, but we'll find out. By the sounds of it, we're getting 132 total points. Could be wrong, could be off, but it's definitely going to be close to there, right? Which means we're going to be able to get a good chunk of the tree. So I just had a look at it, and in order to allocate all of the delirium clusters from the start of the tree, it was 33 points. That required traveling to the top of the tree, however, and a lot of those points that were spent were along travel nodes and also picking up all the minor nodes. Now, if the minor nodes don't turn out to be very valuable, we can probably cut that number down from 33 to, you know, I don't know, maybe like 25 or even less, and all those travel nodes are going to be contributed towards taking other things that are useful in the vicinity. So by the sounds of this, you're going to be able to get a lot of extra passives from this, right? Which is really cool. Now, map completion bonus is basically being replaced by the travel nodes. There's no such thing as like having a chance for a higher tier map to drop. I guess that's kind of redundant if the endgame of the new Atlas is just having all tier 16 maps, and instead they're giving us various bonuses along the tree that allow for extra maps to drop and stuff like that. Now, this is going to be useful for us while we're progressing our Atlas, but once our Atlas is fully progressed and we're juicing maps and we are earning more maps than we need, we can spend more of these points apparently towards the actual points on the tree, rather than getting extra maps, and we're not going to feel penalized by anything like that. What you might have missed is that there is not a single type of travel node. There are actually multiple types. They have slightly different colors and icons. I don't know what the other ones are going to be. Now, they previewed the one that I talked about where the map bosses are going to drop additional connected maps. I don't know what the others are going to be. I'm not going to sit here and wildly speculate and waste anybody's time. But it is something to keep in mind. It may influence the way we think about paving around the tree. Now, if you take a good look at the tree, most of the old nodes are seemingly returning, or at least they're reusing the old icons. Knowing GGG and knowing how they like to be very efficient with their time, I highly suspect that a lot of the old nodes are going to be returning, pretty much in their same form. I'm sure they're going to balance a few or change up a few slightly, but, you know, it's a pretty safe assumption that most of the Atlas passives that we're already used to are just coming back in the same version that they were previously. Now, you seem to be able to access the old Uncharted Realms passives with only 17 map completions. So I counted from the bottom, the starting point, 17 travel nodes in order to get to the top where, you know, the old, like, I think it's called the Guardian's Aid node is, right? Now, this is kind of interesting because it means you're going to be able to access this stuff like right from the get-go well before you need it. Of course, you're not going to be taking this sort of stuff when you're busy progressing through white and yellow maps, but it is nice to have the option to get this stuff as early as you need it. I'm a really big fan of that, and it's going to be really valuable to the people sort of planning out their league starts. If you have a strategy revolving around this, you can keep it in mind. You can have a build that is really good at killing a single target without having to worry necessarily about clearing through your invitations. If your build can kill Guardians, but maybe not invitations, maybe that's still fine. Now, I know a lot of Guardian farming does involve doing the invitations too, but I mean, if you can't do the harder ones, that's really not a problem on your League Starter. You're going to have much more options in terms of the power level of your League Starter and the things it can specialize in as a result of this. Now, obviously, the other thing, I mean, it's obvious to me, but probably not obvious to some of you guys, the value of Alchemy is vastly improved here. Now, just think of the old Maven passives. Imagine you can have all of them active for every single map that you do. That's crazy. That's a lot of extra League mechanics that are going to be in your maps. I presume they're going to decrease the chance of these mechanics appearing, so that we don't just get completely overwhelmed where every map we enter, we're going to have like a Legion, Breach, Blight, etc., right? That would be 2 for 1, so they've probably tempered that down a little bit, but do expect that once you have a fully completed Atlas passive tree, and you have started to optimize it, you're going to encounter a lot of mechanics a lot of the time, and you're not going to even necessarily need to juice your maps in order to make a decent amount of money from this. There's a lot of incentive to rush through your Atlas progression and get as many points as you can early on, because you're going to start swimming in money as a result of this. And also worth keeping in mind that each mechanic seems to have a lot more minor nodes than what the old Maven passives used to. The old Maven passives used to just have 1 minor node to every major node. As you can see in this tree here, we have 5. This means that even if you take 1 path through to the major node, you still are traveling through 3 minors. It's entirely possible that they've just split the power of the old minors in between 3 nodes so that you have to invest more in order to get the same level of power as before. But I suspect there's going to be somewhere in between where they have reduced the power, but the total level of power after acquiring all of the travel nodes is going to be a lot higher, and there might be value in just taking all of the passives within a certain cluster if you're interested in farming a certain mechanic. The Eldritch Currency items are something I'm really keen to get my hands on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining them. I really recommend, at this point in the video, you pause, you go to the reveal stream, and you look at this yourself, since they're just going to do a much better job. But basically, there are 4 tiers of these currencies and 2 types for 8 total. Now, each tier of currency will apply a corresponding tier of an implicit mod. You can apply a random Eater of Worlds or Searing Exarch implicit to uninfluenced items, so they're not going to work on influenced items, they're not going to work on fractured items or synthesized items. The implicits that you're adding are going to overwrite existing implicits on the items, and you can have 1 implicit of each type. So as you saw, there was a blue type of currency and a red type of currency. You can add 1 of each onto an item. If you get like 1 of each tier 4, you can add 2 tier 4 implicits onto an item. The implicit that gets added is random, and so you're going to have to keep applying these currencies until you hit the ones you want. There's a new type of currency item as well called the Orb of Conflict, and this is going to work similar to sort of how Maven Elevation works. It's going to raise the tier of 1 of the implicits on the item at the cost of lowering the other. Now, these implicits go up to tier 6, right? Even though the currencies only allow you to apply up to tier 4, you can use the Orb of Conflict to raise 1 of the implicits up to tier 6. You can then basically use another type of currency to reapply a tier 4 currency, but that's going to get re-rolled, and we'll talk about that now. After using an Orb of Conflict, you can't just raise the tier of the lower implicit back up without re-rolling it entirely, and this has the implication that you maybe don't want to roll both types of tier 4 currencies until you get a really good combo if you're planning on using the Orb of Conflict, because once you finally land on the 2 implicits that you want, you're going to lower one of them to tier 2 potentially. You know, if you're lucky and you manage to raise the other one to tier 6 straight away, the other one's going to get, the one that you don't raise is going to get lowered to tier 2. To get it back up to tier 4, you're going to then have to reapply the tier 4 currency multiple times until you hit the implicit you want. So I would say that if you're trying to chase a tier 6 implicit, you're going to apply tier 4 of your desired mod, then use your Orbs of Conflict in order to try and get it to tier 6. And then you're going to use the other currency type to then start rolling for your tier 4 of the other type. Now, rolling tier 6 implicits, or just good implicit combos in general, is probably going to add a lot of value to these uninfluenced items. If you think about the Onslaught boots that come from Synthesis, they are very high value, and they are always worth like multiple exalts, often dozens of exalts in any given league. Now, I don't know whether necessarily these implicits are going to be as strong as Onslaught. You know, like Perma Onslaught is a big deal, but it is entirely possible, and especially from what we've seen previewed, there are going to be some pretty crazy implicits. So I think we saw one where the tier 6 version of an implicit was giving 35% fizz converted to fire or cold, something like that. I think there's a dot multi one as well. There are a lot of interesting stuff. There are a lot of interesting implicits that were previewed, and there's going to be more that even weren't previewed. Now, the power level of this seems comparable to having 2 good Scourge mods at tier 3, no bad Scourge mods, and no corruption penalty, right? So if you think back to Scourge, it was worth getting a tier 3 Scourge mod, even though it incurred a tier 3 Scourge mod penalty, right? Like, there was a good mod and a bad mod. This sounds more like having 2 good Scourge mods, or even the power level of like 3 or 4 good Scourge mods. There are no penalty mods, and then there's also no corruption penalty. That's pretty interesting to me. Now, obviously, you can't do it on unique items as well. So, maybe not this, maybe comparing it to Scourge wasn't the best comparison, but this is going to power creep the hell out of players. I think a lot of people are underestimating this. These are just extra mods in every item, and you can sort of roll them deterministically until you hit what you want. You can also pick out good uninfluenced items, things that have like life and triple res on them and stuff, and then start adding implicits on top of these in order to have like a really, really valuable, high value item in a single slot. Before I can get to the point where I explain exactly what you're missing about how powerful these new currency items are, I need to show you these last three currency items: Eldritch Chaos Orb, Eldritch Exalted Orb, and the Eldritch Orb of Annulment. So the way the Eldritch Chaos Orb works is that if the Searing Exarch is dominant, it rerolls prefix modifiers. If the Eater of Worlds is dominant on your item, it rerolls suffix modifiers. What does that mean? Well, it means if the red implicit currency that you apply has a higher tier implicit than the blue currency, then it's Searing Exarch dominant, and if the blue implicit is higher tier than the red implicit, then it is considered Eater of Worlds dominant, right? Basically just whichever implicit has the higher tier, it's dominant of that type, and that's why you see like this blue versus red motif on all the currency items. The Eldritch Exalted Orb will add a prefix or a suffix depending on the domination status, I guess, of your item. And the Orb of Annulment will remove a prefix or suffix depending on the domination status. So now I'm going to provide an example that pretty much illustrates why Eldritch Currency items excite the hell out of me. Don't think about money with this example. Obviously, this process is going to be pretty expensive, but it's probably going to be a lot cheaper than what we currently have in order to get an item of similar power level. So basically, the premise behind this is that you can use the implicit modifiers in order to manipulate the way you interact with the items using the other Eldritch Currency mods. So, in our example, you're going to take an item, you're going to apply an Exarch implicit to it, right? So, it's an uninfluenced item, you apply an Exarch implicit. You're then going to apply Eldritch Chaos Orbs in order to re-roll the prefixes until you hit a good combination. Now, this step isn't necessary at all, right? Like, maybe you have an item that already has really good implicits, really good suffixes or really good prefixes. As you can see, the Titan Gauntlets on the right here, these have a decent set of suffixes. So maybe this isn't your approach. I'm just giving you one example of something you can do to create something from scratch. This example probably isn't even the most practical example of this. It's just showing you how damn powerful these items are. So you apply an Exarch implicit to it, you then use Eldritch Chaos Orbs in order to re-roll the prefixes until you hit a good combination of prefixes. You're then going to lock your prefixes using meta mods, and you're going to scour in order to remove all your suffixes. Once the suffixes are removed, you're going to apply the multi-mod craft, and then you're going to craft two other mods, that are typically high value. So like if it's a bow, you're going to multi-mod it, and then you're going to apply local attack speed and local crit. They are really high value suffixes for a weapon. Now what you're going to do, you're going to apply an even higher tier Eater implicit to swap the domination status to the Eater of Worlds. So previously it was like red dominated, and now it's blue dominated. Now that it's blue dominated, you're going to use Eldritch Orbs of Annulment in order to remove the suffix. You have a 1 in 3 chance to remove the multi-mod, and a 2 in 3 chance to remove one of the crafts you applied. Now if you remove one of the crafts you applied, you can just reapply it. Obviously this is going to be a little more expensive if you're applying 1x crafts, but in a lot of cases you're not going to be applying 1x crafts. The crafts are only going to cost you a few Chaos Orbs. Now, once you remove the multi-mod, you're then going to apply an Eldritch Exalted Orb to add a 6th modifier to the item. Because you are blue dominated, it's basically going to then exalt a suffix modifier onto your item. If you're unhappy with it, you can just keep going, right? You can just keep going until you get what you want, right? But basically, after you've done that, you're then going to use Eldritch Implicit Currency Spam in order to get a good tier 4 mod of any type. You're going to use the Orb of Conflict to raise it to tier 6. Now, I don't know whether you want the blue mod or you want the red mod. You want tier 6 or one of these implicits, you're going to basically roll the tier 4 mod, use the Orb of Conflict in order to get it to tier 6. Once it's at tier 6, you're then going to use the other currency type to spam the other one to a tier 4 implicit. And now at this point, you have an item that has 8 good mods. You have a tier 6 implicit, you have a tier 4 implicit, then you have 3 prefixes that you're happy with, you have 2 crafted suffixes and 1 exalted suffix that you've settled on. This is not the most efficient way to craft an item, and I can't think of any situations where you're going to just craft an item from scratch unless, for some reason, the base type is extremely high value. Maybe it's like an Atlas base with a perfect inherent defense roll. I don't know. But this sort of shows you that even starting from scratch, just using these new currency items and the tools we have available to us, we can craft an 8 mod item, and not just random 8 mods, 8 good mods. This is busted. I'm going to spend a bit of time now talking about the uniques that were previewed on the stream. We're not going to spend forever on this, and I think I skipped one or two of them, but we're going to talk about the ones that sort of caught my eye and that I thought were really, impressive, and things that I think might be impactful to the way we play the game. So, Ashes of the Stars. It is an amulet that basically gives you increased experience gain for the gems that you are currently, that you have equipped. It's going to give you increased mana reservation efficiency on all your skills, so all your auras basically, plus 1 level 2 of skill gems, and then I assume a stat that can roll up to 20% to the quality of all your skill gems. Okay, so pretty simple at face value, right? Your auras are going to cost less, your gems are going to get plus 1 level, and then 20% quality to all your skills. And this is all your skills, this is not just like your main skill, this is all of your skills. Important to note, not the support ones, right? Now, in a lot of cases, this is actually going to just be inferior to a standard +2 amulet for most casters. But that's not to worry, because there are some pretty big implications of this nonetheless, and that's what, we'll cover now. Now, by applying to all the gems, it's going to affect a lot of your utility gems and your auras. Now, hitting a +1 level for some of your auras and for some of your utility gems may get your build up to like 5 to 10% extra damage, right? And this is pretty high value, especially for attack builds, since the amulet slot for attack builds isn't as valuable as it is for casters. Casters really care about the amulet slot because they need +2. Attack builds don't care about it as much. I suspect the reason it gives +1 level of all skill gems is so that for casters, the opportunity cost also isn't too high, and there is situationally going to be basically use cases for it as a caster. Now, this has really huge implications for many of the alt quality skill gems in the game. Alt quality skill gems were balanced around the idea that getting additional quality onto a skill gem was not too easy, right? So, if you think about like your main skill, your 6 link, getting extra quality onto that, it's not like you're going to give up one of your support gems to add enhance into it, right? And it's not like you're going to run a weak weapon so that you can get 6 to 7% extra quality. If you want extra quality on this stuff, like you are making actual sacrifices until Ashes of the Stars, right? So Ashes of the Stars doesn't have as high an opportunity cost as all the other options in the game for adding quality to skill gems, and it does so pretty much globally, which is kind of, just like a really big deal. If you look at utility gems such as Phantasmal, Ancestral Protector, running this with Ashes of the Stars is going to give your character 4% more attack speed, which is like insane for just a single utility gem, right? Like one of your gems is giving you 4% more attack speed, which, even considering what it already does, this may still equate to 3% more damage. If you have a lot of these gems and stuff like this across all your gear, like all your auras and stuff like this is going to add up to being like, upwards of maybe 10% more damage just from gems that aren't your main skill, right? You look at Divergent Flicker Strike, you're getting an extra 20% increased teleport range. This is a massive quality of life that, when you're playing Flicker Strike, unless you were incredibly high investment, you're probably never going to consider adding an enhance into your 6 link anyway. So this is really cool. If you look at Divergent Herald of Agony, you have an additional 20% chance to poison. This means that just running this like Divergent Herald of Agony with Ashes of the Stars, you're getting 60% chance to poison, just off, like one reservation effect, which is really, really good. There are a lot of poison builds in the game that don't have easy access to chance to poison, especially with where they are in the tree, that they're not getting necessarily a lot of nodes, or they don't want a lot of those nodes because they want to invest in clusters instead. So this is really, really huge for being able to set your character up that way. Now, you can then amplify that further with like the Herald of Agony rings, and I think it's possible to get now 100% chance to poison just off your Herald of Agony if you're using Divergent Herald of Agony and this amulet. Another thing to keep in mind is that the extra gem XP means that Simulacrum farmer builds might end up using this both for the damage increases and for the profit. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there might be some examples where this happens, and I think that's really cool. I have really thought for a long time that having items that don't just increase the power level of your character, but maybe increase the amount of loot you get by a small amount would be really cool. When you look at item quant items, they basically reduce your character's power in order to get the item quant. So I'm a big fan of stuff like this. I think this is really cool, really good for the game. Here's a preview of the Ceaseless Fist Spike Gloves. They basically apply corrosion on it with your attacks and then give you a chance to gain frenzy and endurance charges when you hit a target with no armor or evasion. Now, corrosion, as I understand it, removes armor and evasion on hit when triggered by attacks, not spells. And then basically that means that once they are fully corroded, you're going to start generating those endurance and frenzy charges. There's no extra work required. You just have to have an attack that hits a lot. So what you probably weren't thinking about the first time you watch this is that basically this is going to be really good for high hit rate attacks such as Cyclone and Rage Vortex, and it's going to be a means of providing frenzy and endurance charge generation burst bosses. Now I think this expansion in particular is going to be very boss focused, so on-kill effects aren't that good. And I think it's really good to have these extra options in order to generate these charges if your build considers them important. I don't know whether these items are going to be cheap. Maybe this is a common drop. I actually think this is going to be a common drop from some of the new bosses, and it's pretty appropriate for what you would expect as a common drop from new bosses. Now, I think this could be genuinely attractive to a lot of melee builds. I have certainly played a lot of melee builds in the past, where I would have happily given up a glove slot in order to gain both frenzy and endurance charges, because this is extra damage and extra defense I wasn't otherwise getting. The item does also have some melee damage as an implicit and fizz damage to attacks, so it's not completely useless outside of these effects. Now, even though it has a melee damage implicit, I actually think we might see some people playing it with bow builds. Now, if you're a bow build that you're taking Iron Reflexes, where you're getting extra mileage out of endurance charges, and you don't really have good ways of generating endurance and frenzy charges, then yeah, this is going to be really good for you. You're not really going to care about wasting the implicit on this item, because all the other parts of this item kind of work perfectly for the things that you were trying to get, and being able to get all those things from a single item is really good. I can certainly think of quite a few bow builds I've played in the past, especially at lower levels of investment, where I, actually would have genuinely wanted these gloves because I had not built the character with easy ways of attaining frenzy and endurance charges. There are a lot of cases where you're playing builds that just don't have high recovery rates and stuff like that, so they can't afford to use Blood Rage for frenzy charge generation, or you want to make a bow character focused around bossing. You can't really afford to rely on Blood Rage when not every boss spawns adds and stuff like that. And you maybe don't necessarily have room to start hardcasting Frenzy, or hardcasting Frenzy is going to cost you DPS and stuff like that. So, yeah, these are a nice item, but yeah, I think these are the things you probably didn't think about initially when you saw this item. Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh aren't as complicated as they first look. However, I'm kind of like on my 10th take trying to explain it to you guys, and I'm kind of struggling, so hopefully this is the final take. Basically, what these new jewels are going to be are, I think, the new Watcher's Eyes for the game. Now, they're going to be rare or chase items, we've been told. I don't know how rare they're going to be. Maybe the chase aspect of them is finding a pair that match, that, is well suited to what you want. Each jewel's going to have a class restriction. As you can see, these ones require Ranger, and the only benefit of the jewel is that they're going to grant the corresponding Ascendancy Keystone as long as you have a pair of them. So in this case, if you're a Ranger and you equip this item and you equip this item, you're going to have the Pathfinder Master Surgeon Ascendancy Keystone. This is kind of cool because you can get this as a Pathfinder and then allocate a 5th node on the tree, or you can get it as a Ranger and a Deadeye. As a Raider or a Deadeye, sorry. And that has some pretty cool implications when you think about the other classes in the game. You might be an Inquisitor that gets the +1 totem node from the Hierophant, and then you can play a Totem Hiero but as an Inquisitor. I think the chase aspect of these items are that there are going to be certain Ascendancy Keystones that are going to be maybe weighted to be rarer than others, like Profane Bloom, and they're going to be very expensive. I very much suspect that if these are sufficiently rare, you could see the high-value Ascendancy nodes costing upwards of a mirror. Now, I think the high-value ones are going to be stuff like +1 Totem, Battle Mage, Profane Bloom, the +2 Proj and +1 Chain Deadeye nodes, Tailwind, Fortitude, and Gratuitous Violence, which is the Gladiator Bleed explosions. Now, don't plan your build around having them until you're certain you can afford a matching pair. Something they could do is maybe make one of them slightly more common and the other one slightly rarer. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, but unless you are sure you can afford a matching pair for the node that you want, I wouldn't be planning a build around them anytime soon. You can expect these to potentially be very, very expensive items. Think about Chase Watcher's Eye items. They can get upwards of 100x. I don't know if we're going to get to that point with these, but it's definitely a possibility, and especially if GGG start manually weighting them based on their own expectations. I wouldn't be expecting to play Profane Bloom as an Elementalist anytime soon. Favoured Maps. Okay, so this is what the new Favoured Map UI is going to look like, basically, and then you can see here it is completed fully with Tower Maps. So, Favoured Map slots are now unlocked via certain objectives, as you saw in the other one. Basically, completing just your first Tier 16 map was going to unlock the top slot. There's only 12, right? I think we had, 16 currently, and we had 32 formerly, but yeah. We're going to have 12 on the new Atlas, and they're still going to grant 10 times weighting to your map drops. But here are the implications of that. So you can now get 120 total weighting for a single map. This means that if there are indeed 100 non-unique maps on the Atlas, roughly 55% of all the maps that you drop are going to be your favorite map. It's much easier to self-sustain very specific strategies now. If you think back to Tropical Island deli farming, that's just going to be a completely self-sustaining thing. You're not going to have to bulk buy maps anymore. And especially with the new Atlas passives, I very much think bulk buying maps is going to be a thing of the past. Farming maps in general may have a lot lower value going forward in the future, though this is probably good for the game. As much as it is fun to sell maps on day one for, 16C a pop, it is kind of unhealthy that casuals run out of maps and, feel very discouraged with the way the game works, or they feel like a lot of strategies are just completely inaccessible to them because they don't want to start risking the huge amount. Something you see in a lot of leagues is that, like, if Tropical Island is popular, people will sell Tropical Island at an absurd price in bulk, to the point where the profitability on that activity is probably not worth the asking price anymore, and it may just be worth going and doing other strats, and this is really discouraging for, like, people that aren't veteran players like myself. So I'm kind of overall happy with this, but I'm not here to review, I'm just here to talk about what you're probably not thinking about at first. Now, you're going to be able to abuse this early by favoriting maps with high mob count in order to inflate your map pool. So when you first hit tier 16 maps, you can just identify the best tier 16 map that has the highest mob count, and if you have like a decent amount of slots available, you can just mass favorite that map and start over-sustaining that map, and then you're just going to have like a huge excess of maps. Then you can favorite other maps and run through your excess, and then you'll have like a good map pool going. You might not need to do it either, because as we explained, the Atlas passives are probably going to allow for significant over-sustain, but it's something to keep in mind, if running out of maps is something that, it typically is a concern for you. Let's talk about Sextants, right? So, Nemesis Currency is going away forever, and that's a good thing. I've been asking for it for a while, so has a lot of other people. Just very unhealthy for the game to be doing that many clicks. Sextants are now going to be only usable on Voidstones, and Voidstones are earnable from Pinnacle bosses, so you're not going to be interacting with Sextants for quite a while. Simple and Prime Sextants are being removed since you won't be able to use Sextants until deep into the endgame anyway. Elevated Sextants are staying. I don't really see what the point of them is. And the new Surveyor's Compass item lets you store Sextant mods since Voidstones aren't tradable. This was a concern for a lot of people. I know I spoke to just a couple of content creators last night that were expressing concerns about, Watchstones potentially going away. This solves that problem. Every time you roll a good Sextant mod onto a Voidstone, you can just use a compass on it and then store that into some other item, which you're then going to be able to very easily trade. You could probably even trade it in bulk, and there are going to be new Sextant mods coming. Okay, so what might you have missed? Well, first off, Surveyor compasses are going to be worth less than 1C. The way economics works, quite simply, is that if you own 10 of these compasses and you're trying to sell them for 1C each on the trade site, and I need 10 compasses, there's no fucking way I'm buying them off you, because I can just open Kirac and click him 10 times and have 10 of these for 10C anyway. So if you're trying to sell them to me, you're going to have to sell them at a discount. So maybe you're going to have to sell them to me for 5C, for example, if you want to get a sale, right? No, half a C each for a total of 5C. These are going to be really cheap, and I think that's really good, because if Sextant modifiers end up being really easily tradable, it means the average cost of Sextants is going to be much higher, since rolling them for a profit is just going to be an activity that people do, right? You're going to buy up a bunch of Sextants, you're going to buy up a bunch of compasses, and then you're just going to roll your Voidstones every time you hit something decent. Even if it's like Legion, you're going to store it up, and then you're going to be able to bulk sell Legion Sextants, basically. And this is going to then have implications down the line for people who are juicing, because it's like, being able to have access to a Legion Sextant is now something that is possible. You can just open up the trade site and buy one of these at any time. You don't have to worry about the supply not existing, or there are some up on the market, but they're so much that they're not worth buying, or maybe they're for a Watchstone that you don't want or you don't need. There was a whole aspect of it in the past where if you had the Magic Watchstones and you had, say, Auspicious, which was the Harbinger one, the really rare one, and you were rolling on that and you hit Legion, you're not going to be able to sell the Legion roll because the base Watchstone itself is worth so much money. So, with the way it's working now, basically anytime you hit a good Sextant mod, sell it. You can just sell it. The economy around selling Sextant mods is going to be active, it's going to be stable, and that's going to be a great thing. I know a lot of content creators have been asking for this and have been talking about this, and this is just wonderful. Now, the new Sextant mods likely aren't going to be as good as Nemesis Currency. That's pretty obvious, but if you think about it, if they add in 3 good mods, they're each like a third as good as Nemesis Currency, combined with the things we've already talked about with Sextant mods being easily tradable, you're still going to see Sextants cost quite a lot of money. They're still going to be worth picking up. They're still going to be worth trading. They're still going to be worth buying, just because there's a lot more accessibility to the sort of effects that they provide. In the past, when you rolled Legion on a on a Watchstone, a lot of the time you just rolled over it, right? It wasn't worth the hassle. Let's say the Legion Sextant was going to be something you could sell for 10C, and you're trying to farm Nemesis currency, it wasn't worth the time to take it out and sell it, and then buy a new base and start rolling on the new base. That's not a problem anymore. So yeah, this is actually a lot bigger. It's a much bigger deal than a lot of people realize, basically. Even though Zana missions are going away, we're now getting Kirac missions, and Kirac missions kind of look like much better versions of Zana missions. So Kirac missions aren't going to appear in maps, right? Kirac's not going to show up randomly in a map. This is going to be accessed purely through your hideout, but in return, when you do complete maps, you have a higher chance to earn a Kirac mission to make up for the fact that he's not going to sometimes appear randomly. And this is much higher value because if you were interacting with Zana in the past for profit, it was much better to be able to run her deterministically, where you could proc her in a tier 16 map and stuff like that. Now, you're not going to be able to do that specifically with Kirac, but there are some other benefits here. Kirac is going to be able to provide you with access to the newer League mechanics. So I believe Expedition was one of the ones that was mentioned. Expedition is pretty high value, and if Kirac just, has a Expedition map sitting there ready to run, at some point when you're ready to cash that out, you can just go run that Expedition map and, run it just for the Expedition. You don't even have to complete the map if you don't want to. That's going to be really cool. Now, Kirac's also going to sell maps the same way Zana did, and he's going to be able to sell maps that have layers of Delirium on them. He's also going to be able to sell the new Conqueror maps. Hopefully, they are going to sell at prices that are worth buying. GGG have said that they intend for us to be checking his inventory constantly, and that, they think the items he's selling are worth it at the moment. At the moment, the Elder and Shaper Guardian maps are not worth buying. A lot of the time, they're offered at like 25C, which is like, in some cases, double what you would buy them off the trade site. So, if GGG are interested in this, they're probably reworking the prices. They said that there was going to be like a greater variety in the prices as well, so maybe it's just like pure RNG, and a lot of them are going to be affordable and worth buying. Now, the other really, really interesting thing that popped up on these slides that I've seen a lot of people talk about, that they are going to sometimes come with implicits. So we saw one where I think there was like Kirac was offering a map that had the implicit where an extra Legion encounter was going to be on the map, one where there were going to be 5 extra shrines, stuff like that. Now, in addition to this, scouting reports are going to reroll all of Kirac's mission selections, and you're basically going to guarantee one type of a certain type of mission. So I think there were like singular scouting reports, and that would guarantee that one of his missions were going to provide you with a unique. There was another type of scouting report that was going to guarantee one of the missions was going to contain a breach. And the way this is going to work, for those of you who didn't sort of work it out, is you're going to get this box and a selection, and then once you pick a map from that, it's going to deplete a Kirac mission, but presumably you're going to keep the inventory. The thing that's interesting here when you think about it is that the ceiling on juicing has gone up. Now, okay, Nemesis farming is gone, but the ceiling is technically a lot higher, where you're going to be able to more reliably add Sextant mods that match the type of content you're farming, and also have implicit map mods that match the type of content you're farming. So let's just say you wanted to farm Legion. Hypothetically, one day in the future, you're going to be able to put Legion on the map device. You're going to be able to put in Legion Scarabs. You're going to have a Legion implicit on your map, and you're going to have Legion Sextant mods, and then you might find Legion naturally in the map. That's like 5 Legion encounters that you can, come across. That's just really cool. Like, being able to basically deterministically encounter that many, at least 4 Legion encounters without having to invest in things like winged scarabs and stuff, that's really cool, and I look forward to the possibility that there's going to be an economy based around buying up Kirac's maps and then putting up for sale the ones with implicits. They're going to be worth money, presumably, and yeah, that's just a very interesting prospect. Now, Kirac missions are probably going to be a powerful source of early money, right? A lot of the mechanics he's providing are just, you can measure them in terms of like what their value is in Chaos Orbs, and yeah, he's going to provide you with basically a selection that you can run at your own pace when you feel like it. And it looks like you'll even be able to synergize these missions with Scarabs and stuff like that, so there's a lot of potential there, right, in order to earn some early money. Now, the scouting reports seem to be the only way to reroll these limited inventories, or rather like the selection of missions. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me if you can reroll these missions just by doing one. I think the intention here for the scouting reports is that, let's say Kirac is offering you like 9 missions and 2 of them are really good. Maybe you want to run both of them, so you can run one and then run the other and then pop a scouting report. We've seen Kirac offer, I think it was like he filled this box up to 9. Presumably you're going to be able to, like with Atlas passives and stuff, you're going to be able to fill up the entire box. And so you're probably going to pick the ones you want and then re-roll them. I think scouting reports are going to be worth a lot of money potentially, because you can just use them to force harvest missions. If you think back in the past, people were farming Zana missions and then spamming maps with Zana missions until they encountered Zana with a harvest. You can do that a lot faster now by just spamming the scouting reports. Presumably, you could just use scouting reports on the spot, so you can sit there cycling through them until you hit harvest. If they're very cheap, that means harvest is going to be very accessible, and people are going to make a lot of money on that, and the people making a lot of money from harvest farming are going to then, basically buy out the market. The price on these are going to go up straight away. I think if you encounter these early in the league, I would start sitting on scouting reports and not using them, because there's a decent chance that the people who farm harvest every league are going to want them and are going to be willing to pay a lot of money in order to try and cycle through their missions in order to get harvest. The future of Sirus is kind of bleak from what we were told. So tier 14 map bosses are now going to be able to drop Conqueror maps the same way that they drop Guardian maps. Conqueror maps are going to work the same way as Elder Guardian maps, where they're just going to take a pre-existing map and it's going to get influenced with the corresponding Conqueror type. You're going to run the map, it's going to spawn a portal to the Conqueror, then you kill the Conqueror, you get a fragment. Full set of fragments, going to spawn Sirus. Okay, surprise, surprise, of course it was going to work that way. Now, it's not entirely clear, but from what they've said, Awakened Gems are supposedly being moved to Maven. Maven, it's not my understanding that Maven is also getting these gems. It appears that they're just going away and not going to be dropped from Sirus and Conquerors anymore, and Maven is inheriting them. Sirus is supposedly going to continue to drop the Awakener Orb, or rather, it's now called the Orb of Domination for some reason, and his other unique loot. They have said that Sirus's loot is going to continue to be worth money and stuff like that, but I don't know if it's going to be super lucrative the way we were expecting it to be if the Awakened Gems aren't dropping, since they were a good chunk of the profits before. Now, the Orb of Domination, while much rarer, is probably not going to be as expensive as some people are expecting, because the value of uninfluenced items is just a lot higher because of the way they work with these Eldritch Implicits. The Eldritch Implicits are very powerful. You can use the Eldritch Implicits to manipulate the way you craft the rest of the item using the other Eldritch Currencies, and then the Eldritch Implicits also have the flexibility of either being able to create like high value bases or being able to be used on items that are already valuable. So like, say you actually craft a good rug item, you can then slap Eldritch Implicits over the top of it, and this is a level of flexibility that you didn't really have with influenced items. I fully expect the Eldritch items to sort of now start seriously competing with the power of influenced items. It doesn't mean in every case they're going to be stronger, or even in most cases, but the fact that it eats into the value of influenced items means that the Orb of Dominations is going to start to see a decrease in value. I can still think of like a billion cases where I'm going to use an Orb of Domination to craft an item for a certain character, but it's probably not going to be as much, right? Which means the demand is going to be as high, and that's going to eat into the fact that the supply is also a lot lower. Okay, now, as I mentioned on the last slide, Sirus probably isn't going to be as highly lucrative anymore due to not having Awakened Gem drops. I think Conquerors are probably going to be a lot better to farm. So Conquerors are apparently getting a Maven invitation, I think that was mentioned, and that means that farming the Conquerors for their fragments and then doing the corresponding invitation and then rinsing and repeating and bulk selling the fragments is probably going to be better than farming Sirus on its own, right? So, and then the final thing to talk about is that Sirus and Conquerors are going to be set to the A8 difficulty. This was mentioned, I think, in the QA, but not in the presentation. Last up is Archnemesis. Now, this is another one where you probably should just go watch the actual trailer for it to understand what's going on here. But basically, you're going to go into a map and there's going to be like 6 frozen Archnemesis rare mobs in the map scattered around near these statues. You're going to only be able to interact with 4 of them in a given map. The reason there's going to be like 6 is so that you don't feel compelled to fully clear the map and search every nook and cranny to find the last statue. It's going to be the first 4 that you run into, and then the ones after that you can pretty much ignore. Now, the rare mobs that you interact with are going to drop itemized mods, right? Then these are the icons you can see in the picture to the right. You can add 1 of these itemized mods each time you interact with the statue. So the first time you interact with it, you add 1, the second time you add the second, so on and so forth, right? Now, the itemized mods make the rare mob a lot harder, but they also add loot types to its drop pool. So as you can see here, basically, by adding these 2 itemized mods, the player is getting a generic reward, they're getting a unique reward, and then a gem reward. Now, occasionally stacking certain mod combinations is going to drop rarer and more powerful itemized mods, so you invest, say, a combination of 4 of these mods, and maybe the final mob is going to spit out a new itemized mod that is super powerful. It's way more powerful than the components that you put in, and you can then use that more powerful one to, juice out subsequent maps worth of Archnemesis loot. What you might have missed, because it was mentioned in the Q&A rather than the reveal stream, is that you're not going to be able to infinitely sustain 4 mods on your map. So each map is going to drop only 2 of these mods on average, which means you can fully invest every second map, but not every single map. Or maybe you're just going to invest 2 per map rather, and you know, the 2 you pick up, you invest into the next map, so on and so forth. Now, the end game of this system is going to probably be figuring out all of the best recipes for the most lucrative mods, and then figuring out which component mods are best saved for which recipes. You might even at some point alter your loot filter so that you're only picking up the mods that go towards these high-value recipes, and only really focusing on these high-value recipes, because eventually you're going to stack up all of these, you know, once you've put in the component mods and gotten back these recipe-based mods, you're then going to combine all the recipe-based mods to have some huge payout. Now, one example that was given was the Innocence mod. The way this worked was that it just converted all of the other currency types, or all of the other reward types from all of your other mods into currency. So if you put the Innocence mod in first, that was going to give you, I think, like 3 currency rewards, but then all of the ones you put in after that were just automatically converted into additional currency rewards, and I think on the stream they showed the individual getting, I think, like 9 currency rewards from the one thing. And important to point out, I don't think I mentioned it on the last slide, is that the mods that you put in on the first encounter carry over to the second, that carries over onto the third, carries over onto the fourth. So the most valuable rewards are probably going to come first, that way you earn that reward 4 times, whereas the least valuable reward is only being earned on the first one. Though I think there's very much going to be the possibility of having really insane payouts. Now let's say that in conjunction with this Innocent mod, there is another recipe-based mod which, when combined and when earned from an Archnemesis rare mob, it's going to give you, say, 7 unique rewards, right? Now, on its own, that's probably worthless, but when combined with the Innocence mod, you can convert those 7 unique rewards into 7 currency rewards, and basically, yeah, you're going to save these up intelligently, and you're going to have yourself a really huge payday of, like, a really fat stack of currency. That's what I think this mechanics is going to be all about. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm thinking a little too big, but that's the way it makes sense in my head, especially with what we've been shown. And if history is any indication, they usually don't show off the most powerful things, right? They usually save them for us to sort of discover on our own. That Innocence mod was very impressive, and it's good to know that there's probably things that are even more impressive out there. That was absolutely worth taking the day off to put together for you guys. I have had an absolute blast making this video. The analysis is just getting me really excited. I don't think I've ever been this excited for what the future holds for Path of Exile. I have been absolutely pogging out all day. All of my friends have been pogging out. All of the other content creators I'm speaking to are pogging out. I think everyone is just super happy about everything that's been previewed. The game is going to become a lot better pretty much overnight as soon as this patch is uploaded, and I can't wait to play it. So from here until the patch gets released, I'm probably going to continue doing videos on the reveals. I'm probably going to be a little more conservative with those videos. If the reveal I don't think is super important, I might skip it. I need to put a lot of time now into practicing my League starters in preparation for, you know, a week from now, I think the League launches. I will probably put out content on my League starter, so keep an eye out for that as well. But yeah, for now, thanks for watching. Give me a like, comment, and subscribe if you liked this video, and I will catch you guys probably tomorrow.